Hello and welcome to the Adoption and Fostering Journal podcast. I'm Vicky Walker, the production editor of the journal. I'm here with Dennis Golm, who is our editor-in-chief. And we are joined by two very special guests today who are going to introduce themselves in a moment. But we're here to talk in particular about an article from our April issue of the journal, which is volume 50, issue 2. And the title of the article is The Reflective Fostering Programme, Improving the Wellbeing of Children in Care Through a Group Intervention for Foster Carers, a Randomised Controlled Trial. So we are here with Nick Midgley and Jackie Tripp. And first of all, we kind of tend to get you to introduce yourselves because we feel like that's the best way for you to give your kind of represent yourself. So Nick, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. So it's lovely to be here. Thank you. My name is Professor Nick Midgley, and I am based at University College London, UCL, and I'm the director of a research unit, which is called Chapter. Chapter stands for the Child Attachment and Psychological Therapies Research Unit. Um, I'm not a foster carer myself. I don't have experience of being a foster carer, but a lot of the research that I've been involved in over a number of years has been around children's social care and foster care as well.
And Jackie, you're coming to us as a foster carer, which is really exciting for us to have you. I mean, we're going to talk about the program, the project, the study, and your involvement in it much more, obviously, as the podcast comes on. But can you introduce yourself as a person to the
Yeah.
podcast, please?
Yes. So hi everyone. Thank you for inviting me. I have been a kinship foster carer now for 6 years. Foster caring wasn't on our agenda. It was all a bit of a shock, all a bit of a surprise. But we had to run with it really and do the best that we could do. Linked with social services, we stayed with them for support. That's how I discovered the reflective fostering study, which I'm incredibly passionate about. I think it was about 3 years ago that I took part in the study, which has brought me to this podcast today. So I'm sure that as we chat, more information will be shared, but it's lovely to be with you. Thank you.
Thank you again for coming. We really, really are delighted to have you both here. So, Nick, if I start with you, can you give us a little bit of background? First of all, what is the Reflective Fostering Programme? And then why did you study it?
Okay. Yeah, to give some background, I suppose I'm sure everyone sort of listening to this or watching this knows that when fostering kinship carers are given the right kind of support, they make a huge difference to the lives of the children in their care. But actually, as researchers, we don't have a lot of evidence about what the right kind of support looks like. That there hasn't been a huge amount of research done, and the research that has been done has often been a little bit uncertain in a sense. We know there are some good programs, for example, that support foster carers of very young children under 3. But for sort of school-age children, there's less evidence out there about what kind of support is most helpful, and particularly over time. So what kind of support not only helps while it's being given, but does it continue to provide support over time? So that was really the background to the study. And colleagues at Anna Freud, which is a mental health charity based in London, led by a colleague of ours called Sheila Redfern. They developed a program called the Reflective Fostering Program, which I'm sure sort of Jackie can tell you much more about what the program's actually like. But in terms of just what it is, it's a 10-session group program for a group of foster or kinship carers. And it was developed as I say, by colleagues at Anna Freud to try and really use what we know from the science and from research about the key principles involved in what a support program might look like. And I was involved from the beginning as the research sort of lead on this. And we did a couple of small pilot projects to sort of test the program, get some feedback from foster carers. And there was some real excitement around it and the feeling that this sort of it offered something that perhaps was a little bit different to other kinds of support. And so we were quite excited about sort of developing it further and trying to develop the evidence as well.
What made it different? What's kind of different about it to the other support that's offered?
I think, I mean, again, I'm sure Jackie will have more to say on this than me, but I remember one of the things that one of the foster carers said to us very early on, who had attended one of the sort of the pilot projects that we ran.
Yeah.
I remember she said she's often been told that you have to look after yourself as a foster carer, but she hadn't really been shown how to look after yourself. And she felt that the reflective fostering program was perhaps her first experience of a program which really took seriously this question of what does it mean to look after yourself as a carer? And if you can look after yourself in a thoughtful, reflective way, how can that then impact on the relationship that you have with the child? So the program, it does have some psychoeducation in it, and but it's not just about teaching foster carers about how they should behave or even about the impact of trauma, although it covers those things. It's also inviting carers to reflect on the impact of the work on themselves, and through that to be able to become more in touch with the needs of the children in their care.
Fantastic.
I'm just wondering, because maybe for our listeners, it might be nice to just have an example of what that means. Maybe Jackie, if you have, do you have an example to share how you looked after yourself, or how you applied the reflective bit, maybe?
Yes. So the one thing that made me want to do the study, take part in it, was the fact that it concentrated on two areas: the relationship with the child, the impact of the child, but the carer looking after themselves, the well-being of the carer. And at that time, I hadn't come across any training that actually dealt with that. Everything was about the children, which of course is really important. But if the carer's not in a good place, it's not going to flow out into the needs of the child. So that was why really I needed to do it. And I'll probably share more later, but I was at my lowest ebb as a carer. And, you know, we can throw those words around, but if I had not taken part in that study, I would not be a foster carer today. It's as simple as that. It totally revolutionised my own strategies and my own caring. And it was things like I was taught about mentalisation. I hadn't come across that before. So, you know, we chatted as a group. So it was a small group of carers. There were mainstream carers and kinship carers on that group. We met for 10 weeks. And after the first session, I couldn't wait to get back, because it became a lifeline, because it was a safe place. It became a safe place to discuss things that we were struggling with as carers, things that maybe you wouldn't be quite as open with to social workers, because maybe you felt you needed to impress the social workers to continue to do the caring. So it became a safe place to just chat about experiences, the things that the children were going through, but actually how we were reacting to those trauma situations, how we had, if we had resolved it, if we had turned a situation. And we were able to reflect on each other, actually. So the mentalization was very important, and I still, so 3 years on, I still use those strategies. There are days that are immensely difficult, and then a situation can pop up, and I generally have to recognize, am I in the right place right now to be dealing with this? Our young man, as well as all the trauma, has ADHD and an autism assessment. He has attachment issues. Attachment sounds really lovely, but actually attachment might mean they bite, they kick, they scream because you are their safe place. Mm. So it's not always a lovely thing. It can be very difficult, and those moments can, they can be triggered very quickly and out of the blue. So you're dealing with all of these things all day and night sometimes, and it can be a drain mentally, it can be a drain physically, emotionally, all of that comes into play. So it's things like recognizing where you're at when a situation rises, having a safe place to chat and know that everything would stay in the room, or you could feed off each other's experiences, things that you tried, and these are they're real people. They're people that have struggled the same as you have. So there's sort of some comfort in that, rather than you're just sat with a group of professionals who have read a textbook. This is not a tick box exercise. This is, each child brings an individual, issue that you have to deal with, and actually day by day that can change. So it's recognizing all of that, and and doing your best, really.
Lovely.
I don't know if I can just jump in there. One of the things that Jackie sort of mentioned that I didn't say is the program is co-facilitated by 2 people, and they are a social worker and a foster carer or kinship carer. And I think that co-delivering the program between a social worker and a foster carer is a really important element of it as well.
Yeah.
And just because we mentioned mentalization as a term, Nick, how would you describe mentalization? It's quite a trendy term at the moment in literature. So how would you describe it?
Again, I'm sure Jackie can probably do much better than me. I'll give the sort of academic answer. I mean, mentalizing, it's a long word, but it's actually describing quite a simple thing that all of us do, and we do it all of the time, which is to kind of make sense of other people's behavior, but also our own behavior in terms of their thoughts and their feelings. If I think about mentalizing my own self, it might mean when I notice I'm feeling cross or I'm feeling angry, sort of being curious about that and think, where's that coming from? If I'm feeling like, really tired or really, like punching the wall, what's the thoughts and feelings behind that, and becoming curious about that. But also then for the children in our care, being curious and open to understand what's behind that behavior, what's the thoughts and feelings there.
And then to check whether such a program works, right, you need to conduct a study, and ideally it would be a randomized controlled trial. And in your case, it was a 2-arm parallel randomized controlled trial, which I'm not saying it's a mouthful, but so in simple terms, what does that mean?
Yeah. No, I know. I apologize for the language in advance, and I'll do my best.
Can you jazz it up, please?
Basically, what it means. So, I said sort of when the program was first developed, we did 2 quite small studies where we looked at how things were before the program started, and then when we went back after the program finished to see whether things had changed or got better. And in both of those projects, there's really promising signs that things had improved and got better. But actually, when, for example, commissioners look to see whether a program, there's evidence that it's effective, that kind of study won't be sufficient. It won't be enough.
Right.
And the reason why is because you could look at that and say, well, it's great that things have changed, but how do we know that they might not have changed anyway? Maybe there was just the child grew up, or there's just other stuff going on in their life. So although that's kind of a good indication of something, it's not considered sort of good enough evidence to, let's say, go into guidelines or to go into commissioning recommendations. So if we want to have that kind of evidence, then what's most recommended is this approach called the randomized control trial, RCT. And basically what it means is that you invite a group of foster carers or kinship carers to be part of a study, but then that group of carers is divided into two groups, and they're randomly divided into two groups. And half of the carers are offered the program, and half of the carers are offered something else or not offered the program. And you follow both groups up sort of before and again when the program finishes, or for a time beyond that. And you see, are there any differences in how things are for the two groups? And if you do see those differences between the groups, given that they both started in the same place and they're both the same carers and you just randomly divided them, that's quite strong evidence that any changes you've seen are almost certainly because of the program rather than that they would have happened otherwise. So that's why, because we did want to sort of do the kind of research that could really impact on sort of recommendations and guidelines and commissioning, that's why we decided to do this randomized clinical trial.
Good. And you already said that kinship carers, foster carers were your kind of the people who took part in the study. Can you tell us a bit more about what the criteria for taking part were? So who was eligible, for instance?
Sure. Yeah. So I suppose the first thing to say, this was actually the largest ever randomized control trial in the UK of a program to support foster carers.
Yeah, give our listeners a second to take that in.
Okay,
There
thank
we
you.
go. So you heard it. You heard it here first. Okay. Now you may continue.
Thank you. And all credit to the funders of the study, which was the NIHR, which is the National Institute for Health and Social Care Research, who they recognized this was an important topic and that it was worth investing money to do this kind of really large scale research, which is it's not easy to do. It takes a lot of time, a lot of effort. There were, I think, 4 different universities and 17 local authorities and independent fostering agencies involved in this project led by UCL. But this is not something you can do lightly. It was a huge project. Over probably 3 or 4 years it took to complete the study. With immaculate timing, we actually began the study just as the COVID lockdowns began in 2021. So it was also done under really challenging contexts. And again, just credit particularly to the carers and the local authorities and the IFAs who we thought would just say, look, we can't be involved when so much is going on. But I think they were really committed to developing the evidence for support for foster carers as well. So everyone really pulled the stops out to make this happen. Your question was who was involved. So we had 517 carers in the end took part in the study.
It's a very large sample for this type of research as well, right?
Really large, yeah, really large from all over the country. And we tried to keep the criteria quite broad. So it was any foster or kinship or connected carer who was caring for a child who at that time was aged between 4 and 13. So we were looking at carers particularly of that age child. And really the only exclusion was we weren't looking at children who were in an emergency placement or a very short-term placement. So it was children who were in a placement where at least the plan was that they would be there for a minimum of 4 months. That was really our only criteria. And I can pause there, or I can keep going.
But yeah, no, I think that's absolutely fine. I think it was just good to hear about the size of the group who took part and about kind of the age range of the
Yeah.
children who were being cared for.
One
And
thing
yeah,
So one thing, because I think it is quite important, is unfortunately we see this a lot, not just in foster care, but in research generally, that the people who join research studies are not always representative of the diversity of people in our
mm,
communities. And this was something we were very mindful of this study. And in fact, when we started the project, we sort of looked to see how we were doing early on, and we weren't doing very well in terms of recruiting a diversity of foster carers. And so we had a wonderful team of foster and kinship carers um, who's really helped us to understand what we were doing wrong, that we weren't reaching a wide range of carers. And we made quite a lot of changes to ensure that, for example, male carers and kinship carers, and also carers from, for example, South Asian communities who initially were very underrepresented in the study. We reached out to those groups. And I'm really pleased that by the end of the study, the carers who were part of it did seem to really reflect the diversity of carers in the country.
Which actually which coincidentally ties in with an earlier article we published in Adoption and Fostering about the diversity of foster carers in research, which concluded, there wasn't as much diversity.
yeah.
Um, so
And it's really, really important because if the research isn't reflecting the reality, it can't lead to the right kind of outcomes.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, Jackie, from your perspective, you're a kinship carer.
Yeah.
How do you come across the program? How did you get involved in it in the first place?
Okay. So, as I say, it was 6 years ago
Mm.
that we got the emergency call. Can we have the children? It's quite shocking. Suddenly, you're having to deal with things that you never planned for.
Mm.
Um, but we stayed with Leicestershire Social Services. Um, and so we decided as carers that we would become kinship carers, that we would undertake training, but that we would stay with social services in order to have more support and
Mm.
guidance through whatever was coming. So it was Leicestershire County Council, the actual social services, that notified everyone. So I had an email telling us about the study. Now, the initial email I ignored because I was working full time and felt that I couldn't give it the time it needed. And then all of a sudden, I took early retirement. Even though I'm back again, I took some early retirement. Circumstances changed, and then I got another email about the course. So I decided then that I would do it. I felt that I could give it some time. I didn't fully appreciate what it involved, but it looked interesting, and I just liked that initial, if you like, nugget that drew me. That was, looking at the well-being of the carer, because, as I say, as a carer, it was immensely difficult, really quite shocking, some of the circumstances, some of the balls that we were trying to juggle. And we had two very needy children, to be looking after. So I decided to go ahead, and I really thought I would be part of the group that would just have to fill in paperwork. So I thought it'll be okay. That's what it will do. But I remember one of the questions being, do you feel you do a good job at caring? Do you feel, I might not be wording it right, but it basically said, as a carer, do you feel you do a good job? And I put no, I don't, because, and I still probably would feel no, I don't, because there's always something else to deal with. You know, you feel like there might be a little bit of success, or you've come through something, and then another hour could bring something else. Another day would bring something else. So it's a constant. Foster caring is a constant meeting the needs of the children, and constantly changing. Anyway, I then received an email to say I've been one of the lucky ones and that we were meeting face to face. And we had the 10 sessions. But I loved it. I absolutely loved it, even from the first session. And I think for me, it was the first time that I'd sat with other carers and really shared experiences. And as Nick explained earlier, there was a social worker and a foster carer. She actually was a social worker as well, but it really worked. It was ladies in our situation, but the two that led the course, it really worked. They were trained to deliver the course, but they were able to share as well. You know, we all sort of shared together and talked into circumstances. They just sort of kept us on track because it's quite easy. I warned Nick this morning, you might have to keep me on track. It's when you're talking about such need, you know, you can have a lot to say about it. So, you know, that they sort of kept us on track, and whatever the objection of that particular meeting was, you know, they would bring us back to that. But most helpful. You know, I thoroughly enjoyed the time together and was quite sad in the end when those 10 weeks, I think because it became such a safe place. But one thing it did leave you with was strategies, you know, to take home. It's not about have a think about this. What do you think? Right, off you go then. You know, there is follow up, but it's the strategies, the things that you pick up in the training, you know, that you need to apply. You do need to apply it. And for me personally, I had such a lot of change to do, and it was quite difficult. It was quite difficult to admit that I'm the kind of character that wants instant resolve, you know, because it wasn't going to come. And so I've had to learn to be patient. I've had to learn to pick battles. I've had to learn not to react, but to respond to a need. I've had to learn, I've had to dig deep and really consider, why is this trigger happening? What's brought it? What is needed right now? And of course it takes a lot of experience in all sorts of things, but there are so many strategies along the study, things that we shared about as carers, but also things that we were challenged to think about. You know, the mentalization, the emotional thermometer, you know, red, green, and amber, which sounds very simple, but when you're living in a situation, you know, and your child is, you know, he's gone from 0 to 100 in 2 seconds, you know, when, especially as a school teacher, you want to go, no, come on, we're going to calm down. You know, it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. You have to meet that child's needs, and, you know, you have to understand what's brought that and be compassionate. And you have to dig much deeper than I ever would have done before. You know, I have to say, fostering and the reflective study has changed my life. You know, I react badly from time to time. I still, you know, instinct says, oh, react like that, but actually you can't, and it doesn't, it exasperates the situation. It doesn't resolve it. And so if we're going to make any difference, and let's face it, the whole point of fostering is to make a difference in these young people's lives. If we're going to do that, then we have to learn how we can do it for them. And then in the process, be looking after yourself. It's such a tall order. But I think we managed to do it. I think we do. My husband, he's about to take the study, actually. I think he's booked on for in a couple of months' time, because he was so inspired. I would go home and talk about all the things that we'd shared, and then he would watch me put it into being. And even on where are we now? Tuesday. So late last week, there was a situation. You wouldn't believe how a tin of ravioli could be a huge trigger. And it's something as simple as that. The flavour's not right, the colour's not right, it's not the same tin that you normally buy. Something like that can actually really trigger a big situation, because they go up from there. And you know, it's not as easy as, okay, I'll change it, because what happens then is, well, go and do something else. Well, this is the child. Go and get something else. I don't want. So then suddenly you are dealing with all these emotions. And, you know, the way I was able to address it, which took a good few minutes, you know, my husband came into me and just said, well done for that. Because in the end, we completely diffused the situation. But it could have been a major outburst. It would have been a major outburst. And again, it's pulling on all those resources and all those strategies that I picked up from, you know, the time doing the course.
Nick, that must be music to your ears listening to Jackie. And my guess is that a lot of the things she just described would fall under the aims of the program. But could you just summarize what were you hoping to find when you kind of started the trial, and maybe also did you?
Yeah, no, thank you. And as always, it's a privilege hearing Jackie talking about her experience. Yeah, so you're absolutely right. In terms of what we were trying to find out, so one of the things we wanted to look at was if the program, so now the question was, is the program more helpful than carers just getting the usual support that they were being offered by their IFA or their local authority fostering team? And we wanted to look whether it was helpful not just for the after the program finished, but because there's so little evidence of long-term impact, we wanted to see, we went back a year later to see, has there also been an impact a year after the program finishes, or a greater impact than for carers who had their usual support. And we were looking at different levels. So first of all, we wanted to see, did the program have an impact on the carers themselves? The carers who came into the program really reported very high levels of stress, very high levels of burnout. So we wanted to see, could we have an impact on those for the carer? That was our first question. Then we wanted to see, would that lead to improvements in their relationship with the child in their care, or the children in their care? And then thirdly, we wanted to see, would that then lead to improvements in the child's well-being in terms of their emotional well-being? And then finally, we wanted to look at, did that have an impact on the stability of placements? And also we wanted to look at what's called cost effectiveness, which is a bit complex, but again, for commissioners, it's really an important question. If we're going to invest money in a program, what's the financial implications of that? And in particular, would it save us money in the longer run in terms of the impact on use of services? So we also worked with an expert in health economics to do a cost evaluation of the program. So that's what we were looking at. Do you want me to sort of run through what we found?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Now that's the exciting bit, isn't it?
Yeah. Um, so, I mean, as ever with studies like this, the findings are not straightforward, and it's a mixed picture. Um,
Mm.
but in summary, what we found is when we looked at, again, compared to usual care, did the program have a greater impact on the carers' well-being? It was very clear evidence that it did. Uh,
Mm.
that the carers who had attended the program were less stressed. They reported lower levels of burnout, also a greater sort of reflective sort of ability capacity than the carers who had not attended the program. So there was a very clear sort of what we call a statistically significant sort of difference there. In terms of then, and in fact, we also looked at we asked the carers to say themselves what did they want from the program, and when we looked at how much it had achieved what the carers themselves wanted, again there was a significant difference to those who hadn't attended. We looked also at the relationship between the carer and the child, and again it showed that those who had attended the program had a significantly better, greater improvement in their relationship to the child than those who hadn't attended the program. Where we didn't find the outcome that we had been asking was in terms of the direct impact on the child themselves.
Mm.
So the children whose carers had attended the program, was their emotional well-being more improved than the children of the carers who hadn't? And
Mm.
we didn't find a difference there. The children actually improved whether the carers had intended or not, but there wasn't a difference, a significant difference in terms of the children's well-being. That was measured by something called the SDQ, the Strengths and Difficulties Questionnaire. We also didn't find an impact on what's called placement stability. So the good news was not that many children moved placement across the study generally, but there wasn't a difference in how many placement moves happened for the carers who had attended the program and those who didn't. And then the final one was this cost effectiveness. And there actually we did find a difference, so that attending the program was more cost effective than not attending the program. So even though it cost more to deliver the program, it
Mm.
saved money for the local authorities in terms of other kind of costs over the next year after the end of the program. So in summary, that's what we found.
But I feel like also, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like in other parenting programs, like don't know, I recall parenting programs with ADHD, I also believe they quite often don't find changes in the symptoms of the child necessary, but they find differences in parenting strategies and other markers, right? So that wouldn't be too far off from your findings, would it?
Yeah, I mean, in that sense, it's perhaps not that surprising. And the children who were in the study, when they came into the study, really had quite high levels of emotional and behavioural problems, much sort of beyond what we would call a clinical sort of cut-off level. So perhaps it's not surprising that we didn't see a significant change there. But as you say, what we did see is a change in the carer's capacity to manage that, to the quality of the relationships that they were having with the children in their care, and the impact that it was having on the carers themselves.
Mhm.
And Jackie, you've talked about the impact it had on you, how life-changing it was, and how it's continued to improve those relationships and your experience of caring. And I think obviously such a great endorsement that your husband is looking to do it as well. So obviously you would recommend the program.
Yeah.
Do you have any final words to say on that?
I am so passionate that I think I struggle to put it into words. It has had the most amazing impact on my life. And when I say I was at my lowest ebb, we really were thinking we couldn't continue as carers. It was costing us everything, emotionally, mentally. Obviously, it has an impact then on your relationships at home. And I'm not sure. I suppose we were having some good impact for the children, but I'm not sure we were gaining as much as could be. And then over time of applying, thinking about it, working together, because although Keith hadn't attended the course, we definitely shared the strategies. And we continue to do so. As carers, we continue, because actually, for our circumstances, that's the only way forward. And so I can honestly say the reason that we are still carers today is because I took part in this study. And that's probably 3 years later. And I did recently share with Nick that we are even considering mainstream fostering now, because we feel we've learned such a lot as carers, but such a huge impact from the study that we feel that we're in a good place. Regardless of what we're juggling, we feel that we're in a good place and can actually give more to children that are needing something. So I absolutely, totally recommend it. Yeah.
How then would a foster carer get onto the programme? How practically would it
So it is
work?
usually, Nick, you might need to help me here, but it is usually from their local authority, isn't it? I do believe, is it nationally now, Nick, quite a lot of local authorities have actually taken it on board. So I think if they contact us, so foster carers have their own social worker, which give them support. So they could talk to their own social worker. So this isn't the children's social worker, although they could go that route. So the carer would have their own social worker. So there are people within the local authority that they can have immediate contact with, who would know who to contact. But this would be certainly Leicestershire. It is in their training brochures. You could look through the training and actually choose to pick it up themselves and actually just book onto. Hopefully there are courses that have already been entered into the diary that they can book onto for themselves. But any issues, they can talk to their local authority about it.
Yeah, I mean, in a sense, just to add a word of sort of, not caution exactly on that, but certainly a lot of the teams who are part of the study have continued, like Leicestershire, have continued to offer the programme once the study has finished. But actually, the reality is that as yet, this programme isn't available in most local authorities or most fostering services. And obviously, partly that this paper will be where the results of the study come out, and we hope will be part of showing, look, there is evidence for this programme and that it should be offered. But it will probably rely a lot on foster and kinship carers, also going to their services and asking for this, or even demanding that these services are available. And government and commissioners taking the evidence seriously and sort of investing in the programme. Diana Freud, the charity that developed the programme, does offer trainings for people who want to become facilitators of the programme. So local authorities and IFAs who wanted to be trained in the programme can contact Anna Freud. But I think there's, unfortunately, we don't always see evidence translated into practice and into implementation and commissioning. So I hope this podcast and this paper will be a first step in that, but it won't be, if it's the only step, unfortunately, it won't be enough, and it will be what people do with this evidence going forward.
think
Mm.
I think that's a maybe good, impactful last statement. Where do we go from here, basically?
Yeah.
So thank you both very, very much for being on the podcast. It has been an absolute pleasure, and it's so nice to have had the opportunity to hear kind of the researcher perspective and the kind of lived experience perspective of actually participating in the trial. So thank you very much. That was lovely.
Absolutely wonderful. And I'll just give you a reminder again of the title of the article. So it's the Reflective Fostering Programme, Improving the Wellbeing of Children in Care Through a Group Intervention for Foster Carers, a Randomised Controlled Trial. Officially in Volume 50, Issue 2, April 2026, of Adoption and Fostering, but online, obviously, on the SAGE website as well. Yes, thank you so much, Nick and Jackie. It's been wonderful.
Pleasure.
Yeah, thanks.